This video will cover the basics of the discovery of atoms. And by the end, we'll cover some basic information, and by the end, we'll be able to answer this question: did each of these guys think the atom can be broken into smaller pieces? And so we'll start with Democritus. Democritus was an ancient Greek philosopher, and he's the first person to use the word atom. So he coined the term atom. And what he thought was that atoms are the smallest piece of matter. So he thought that atoms cannot be broken down. He thought there was nothing smaller than an atom. Well, Democritus's ideas didn't stay popular for long. So for a long time, people did not think atoms existed. But then, almost 2,000 years later, Dalton, who was a scientist, did some experiments and said, hey, I think that atoms are a thing. And you can learn a lot more about what Dalton said. But one thing that he said was that atoms are the smallest parts of matter. And therefore, they could not be broken down. Okay, so now scientists are running with this idea of atoms, and Thomson is doing some experiments and learned some more stuff. Thomson was using the cathode ray tube in his experiments, and he found a really small negatively charged particle, and that is the electron. So he discovered electrons. His model was called the plum pudding model. People liked this idea, and so Rutherford was a scientist about 12 years later who was doing some experiments on atoms. And so that's Ernest Rutherford. And Rutherford did this really famous experiment called the gold foil experiment. And in the gold foil experiment, what he did was he launched these teeny particles called alpha particles. And that little fish-looking thing there, that's an alpha. So he took these alpha particles, which are made up of 2 protons and 2 neutrons. Now, he didn't know about protons before the experiment, but that's what they were made of. He launched these alpha particles at a very thin sheet of gold foil. He thought the particles would go straight through, but surprise, some particles bounced back, and he said they must have bounced off of something. And he hypothesized that something was the nucleus. And so Rutherford discovered the nucleus. He said this nucleus is small and dense, and what's in the nucleus is protons. So he discovered the nucleus and protons. They didn't know about neutrons yet. So that is the basics of the atomic discoveries. If we go back up here, we'll see that Democritus and Dalton did not think atoms can be broken into smaller pieces. Thomson knew about electrons. He knew there was something smaller than the atom, so that's yes. Rutherford knew about electrons and protons, so he also knew there were things smaller than the atom, so that's